So I read over 400 screenplays a year, mostly from amateur writers, and I see the same character problems again and again and again. Now, before we get into these, I want to say there's really only one rule in screenwriting. Don't be boring. That's it. Don't be boring. You can kind of get away with a lot if you're really entertaining, but I just see too many screenplays do things that just lose the reader and make it not have any emotional resonance. So the first one is no lead character. If a writer is very into the plot and the plot is very fascinating and they like all the intricacies of the plot, it becomes a movie about a situation instead of characters. So the POV is all over the place. We don't really focus on one character. Or something else I see is a script will start very strongly sole protagonist. We have a main character, we set them up. But then I think they don't really understand how this journey relates to that character's flaw and how it changes them. So all of a sudden, like at the midpoint, we start shelling out to other characters, and then it gets even more populated. Third act, it's like an ensemble piece, and the lead is like a secondary character. And then towards the end, they have a conversation with someone where they tell them, you know, you should really change, and this is why. And they go, oh, you're right, I should change. I've changed. And then I think it's because there's a disconnect between the journey applying to the lead character's flaw. It's not the journey that fixes their flaw. So they're just kind of going through the motions, doing whatever. And then there's a little band-aid that the writer puts at the end, like, here, they changed because of this conversation with this person. Well, it just made the whole journey pointless. They could have had that conversation with someone at Starbucks in the second scene and they could have changed and we didn't need the whole journey. So be careful about losing your lead character around the midpoint and starting to go check out what Bob's doing and then go over here and follow Mary. It just feels like the story gets lost. The second one, and you've heard this one before, passive character, where the character just doesn't have a goal, they don't really do anything, they just kind of have things done to them, and it's just boring. And it also makes it hard for the reader to understand your character. We kind of understand characters because of their actions and what they want. And when the character just kind of sits there, we kind of don't understand, like, what do they want? What's their deal? Who are they? So you don't want to have a passive main character. The next one is somewhat related to that, and it's a lukewarm lead character. I see a lot of scripts where someone has a goal, but they kind of don't really care about the goal. Like, they're trying to get into med school, and that would be the easiest thing to do, and that's what their dad expects them to do, but they don't really know if they really want to go to med school. So they spend the whole screenplay like getting in a fight with one of their professors who isn't giving them the grade they need to get into med school, but yet at the same time they're like, I don't know if I want to get into med school. So it's just like they have a goal, but they kind of really don't care about the goal. It's like whatever. Lukewarm main character. The next one is the goal has low stakes. So in this one, a character really wants a goal, but we, the audience, kind of don't really care if they get the goal because it has low stakes. So let's say we have, you know, the thief who comes back to do one more diamond heist. And maybe this diamond heist will set them up nice and cushy so they can retire. But they already have plenty of money. They already have an apartment, whatever. This is just going to be extra spending money in their retirement years. So it's like, okay, it's a lot of money and they want it, but we as the audience can't really get too invested in the goal because we're like, if they don't get it, they're still gonna be fine. It doesn't have high stakes. So you wanna find some way to make the stakes higher externally, like they, you know, aren't so cushy or they have a more desperate need to have it, and then definitely make sure they have internal stakes to more justify this whole thing. So that one is the goal has low stakes. The next one is the goal isn't personal. This usually comes into play with like cop movies or reporter movies. I call it the characters just doing their job. It's not a lukewarm goal. The cop wants to find the serial killer, so they want to solve the case, and it has high stakes. If they don't solve the case, somebody's going to die, but they're just doing their job. They don't know the victim, and they could go home at night and leave the job at work and spend time with their family and relax, maybe watch a football game. It's not a passionate goal because there's no personal connection. It's not like they knew the victim. It wasn't like their daughter, and so now they've got to find who killed this person, where they don't sleep at night. They're so obsessed with, they've got to find this person. It could also be like a reporter who, they want to get ahead in their job, so they've caught wind of some really hot story, and they definitely want to get this story, but the story's interchangeable. It could be any big story. It doesn't necessarily have to be that big story. They have no personal connection to it. So if you can make the goal more personal, and that goal could have high stakes. They could be uncovering the president, wiretapping or whatever. But if they don't have a personal connection, it's important and they want it, but it isn't that passion that we need. So look at The Fugitive, the Harrison Ford character. If he doesn't solve the case of his wife's death, and he wants to know who killed my wife, that's passion right there. If he doesn't do it, he's also going to go to jail. So he's totally personally invested in this. That would be different than, say, a cop investigating the same case who's like, oh gosh, I hope we catch this guy. So try to make the goal more personal. Now, if you really can't do that, it doesn't work, then we have the next one, making the goal passionate. You can still make the goal passionate even if they don't have a personal connection. So this was done really well in Silence of the Lambs. Clarice wanted to solve this case, and she wanted to do it because this was bringing up the past. This was making her think of how she couldn't save the lambs. So that gave her passion about this case, not just because, she cares that women are dying, not just because she cares about impressing higher ups, about doing a good job. It became personal and passionate because of her ghost, because of her history. So if you can't make the goal personal, try to still make it passionate for some reason. So done very beautifully in Silence of the Lambs. And that was done with the story Ghost. So that's usually something you can put in to make the goal more passionate. And here I want to add some errors I see that screenwriters do with their ghost. For some reason, screenwriters think they have to set up in the beginning their entire character. So you 100% understand everything about their character. Their character's like a flasher instead of a stripper. Like right in the beginning, they're like, here's my character, here's everything, there's no layers. Well, if you look at Silence of the Lambs, she had a ghost and we got little bits of it as we went on. It was almost its own little story that developed throughout the script, and it was something else that helped drive the story forward because we're learning more. What is her problem? What happened in the past? What is that? And we had all those great scenes of Hannibal Lecter having to coax that out of her, and it's a scary place she doesn't want to think about, and then we're finally getting the information. And so if in the beginning of the movie in Silence of the Lambs they would have done like a little 5-page teaser kind of sorta thing showing you Clarice when she's a child, how her father died, and then how she went to the relatives, and then how she couldn't save the lambs, and then started the movie with you knowing everything, it would have lost so much. So I see this again and again, the reveal of everything there is to know about the ghost in the very beginning in the setup, and then there's no mystery involved from then on, and they'll keep referring to the ghost like, oh, remember, like the bad version of the Silence of the Lambs would be a teaser in the beginning that's all about Clarice as a child and about lambs, which makes you think this is a movie about something completely different than it is. Then they would have Clarice seeing the lambs and running and trying to save the lambs, and then she would wake up in a sweat like, and they'd do that like 7 times throughout the whole movie, again and again and again, to remind you, remember, she's hearing the lambs, she wants those to go away, she's got to solve this case, remember? So that was the boring, horrible version of Silence of the Lambs. The entire ghost told to you all up front, you know everything about it. There's no more scenes with Hannibal Lecter where he's trying to coax out her inner demons, her what scares her at night, and then we just get repetitive nightmares about lamb screaming 17 times. The next problem is your character doesn't face strong conflict. Everything's just way the heck too easy. My boyfriend and I love to watch Forensic Files, and we laugh because almost every case is solved with a phone call, not forensics usually. So we wait for it, and then he'll always say, and then they got a phone call. We're like, there it is, they got a phone call, tipping them off. If you do have, a cop chasing the serial killer, he can't go into the victim's room and then find a business card that tells them exactly, it just can't be too easy, and they have to face obstacles and conflict, because that's another way you reveal character, is how they function when they're under pressure. So you've got to put them in situations with other characters where they're at odds. You've got to give them conflict. You just cannot have everything go really well and everyone supports them and everyone helps them and it's super easy, because that's really boring. The next one is the character does not make a tough choice in the end. This is usually omitted most of the time. So I talked about that example where he had a main character. They go through this whole journey that turned out to mean nothing, because at the very end they have a conversation with someone else and they go, oh yeah, I should change, and then they change. It's like, no. So the way we know the character changed is they make a choice that is different than the way they would have made a choice. So let's say a character really wants to win the Miss USA pageant, and they're obsessed with it, and they're just going crazy, and maybe they're, throwing pearls on the floor and making the other girls trip, whatever. They just so want this, and then they change, and the way you would know they changed would be that they throw it, like they don't show up, or they let their friend do it, or someone asks them, if you had one wish, what would it be? She'd say something horribly un-PC that offended everyone. She throws the pageant, and she does that to help her friend that she thinks should get it instead of her, something like that. So you need to have your character make a tough choice, and that is how you know they truly changed. The next one is the antagonist is too purely evil. They just delight in making people miserable. They're straight out of a silent movie with like a handlebar mustache, and they're like, haha, I've got you now. It just becomes cartoony and it's ridiculous. So you have to have your antagonist be a little more shaded. The antagonist should actually believe what they are doing is right because of their own thinking. So do not make them just delight in evil. That's boring. The next one is a protagonist being too generic and perfect. Like he's Mr. Always awesome, always ends up on top, always cool. It's just boring. The next one is faulty character logic. This usually happens when the writer is forcing the character to do what the plot needs, but it doesn't make any sense whatsoever that the character would do that. So you want to make sure all throughout your character has strong motivation for doing what they're doing. The next one is all characters being stereotypes. They're just like straight out of central casting. Everything is what you would expect it to be. Any writer could come up with these characters. Any person who isn't even a writer could come up with these characters. They're just boring and predictable. Now, going along with that, the next one is trying too hard to avoid stereotypes, where everything is different and not what you think it should be. We are more sensitive in this society now, but people try too hard to populate the script. It's like there's no such thing as like a white straight man in the whole screenplay. Everyone's like a woman or bisexual, trisexual, multisexual, polygamous. Like everybody's something, and they're just trying way too hard to make everything different to the point it becomes like some kind of parallel dimension. So trying too hard to avoid stereotypes then becomes ridiculous too. And the last one is a weak or an untalented lead, like someone who's just kind of doesn't make good choices, and they're not very strong, they're kind of timid. They might have a goal, but they try to get it, but it's like the tiniest little thing they can't deal with, and they just aren't competent. They just don't feel strong enough to carry the story. You want your character to be strong enough to carry the story. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be, like Indiana Jones and they're so awesome. It could just be they need to have a more bold personality. They need to have a stronger opinion about things. They just kind of feel flat, and they're trying, but it doesn't take much to discourage them, and they just don't really have any talents, and they're not very good at things. You want a character that feels strong enough that they can carry the film. So those are some things to look out for with your characters. I hope this video helped you. If it did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will talk to you later.